Okay, welcome to this presentation on the regulatory framework in India for trade and investment. So I would begin with the main organizations which oversee all kinds of investment and trade in the country. So we have, for trade purpose, we have the DGFT, or the Director General of Foreign Trade. This organization formulates foreign trade policy and the handbook of procedures. And it's something which anybody from any country who is looking to do business in India or trade, export into India, would need to understand, or at least find an agent who would be able to decipher for you. This trade policy was for 5 years, 2015 to 2020, but it was extended and it's now valid till March 2022. So after that, a new policy is expected to be in place. I don't want to go into the technicalities of it because that's not required. Then the other is the Reserve Bank of India, which plays a great, it's like your, it's the central bank, and it regulates all your foreign exchange transactions. It has come out with its act in '99, which is the Foreign Exchange Management Act. Earlier, we had the Regulation Act, but they said, we don't want to regulate, we don't want to control, we just want to give you guidelines. And so that's how the FEMA came out. And it informs like how in your export and import transactions, what are the modes of payment realization, how the documents have to be routed, and then also what are the period like credit terms, the maximum terms for realization of foreign exchange, or even for payment of your foreign exchange for imports. So it gives clear guidelines, and this is something which we would definitely be aware of. And then you have the authorized dealer banks. Then the other thing are the customs, which they have their now own software. So everything is online. You don't have to, like previous time, go to the docks or to the port and prove the valuation of your goods and have them inspected. Everything is done online or through custom house agents. And it's the software which is actually driving the clearance of goods for both imports and exports. And then for any dispute aspect, of course, you have the International Chamber of Commerce, and you have, of course, their circulars which have come out for uniform customs procedure for documentary credit, and Incoterms, which explain what are the FOB, CNF, just how you price your goods, and what is the responsibility of the buyers and what is the responsibility of the sellers, where does one responsibility or end, and where does the other one start. So all is very well explained in these Incoterms, and these international terms are all very well accepted in India. So it's and all these, as you are a member of all the all the UN bodies, so there is no issue like should any matter arise with any kind of dispute. Now, for doing any export-import business, you need to be aware of three things. One is having an import-export code. It's called IEC, which is issued by the DGFT. So that's what you just need to get from them. It's a very simple one-page document. You can fill it up online and apply, and it will be issued within no time. They're very efficient. The other thing is to be aware of the foreign trade policy, which I just talked about. And the third important is whether your goods are requiring export license or they're restricted goods. So generally you have goods which are freely permitted, which are almost 90%, then you have restricted goods, and then you have goods which are totally prohibited. So you have to just be aware in which category it falls. If it's restricted, then you need a license. and there are various kinds of licenses available. So I is explain the role of the DGFT. Earlier it was called Chief Controller of Imports and Exports. So they decided the word control. It's a very it's a term which has come down from the time of the British and colonial rule. So we said no, we have shed all that. They have to be there as a facilitator. So basically they have changed the name. So the DGFT facilitates, promotes, and regulates. So the foreign trade policy touches on a lot of the legal framework and the different export promotion schemes available for manufacturers and organizations within India, to promote their goods, getting access to duty-free inputs and maybe concessions in terms of taxes or or maybe duties, all kinds of duties. And then, of course, how we can address quality complaints and trade disputes internationally. So all this is covered in the foreign trade policy. Just awareness of it, or maybe your the agent or your collaborator or the person with whom you are associated with in India can explain to you the gist as per what is your mode of entry into the country. Now, the Foreign Exchange Management Act talks about the trade, means basically how the trade payments, which I mentioned earlier, and it also defines your current and capital account transactions. Capital account is where assets and your liabilities move, overseas. So where you do investments, but otherwise it's basically a trade account if you're just doing import and exports. And current is where you may, make particular purchases overseas, like while you're traveling or for education purposes. So and it specifies, of course, the again the automatic route which is available for investments in this country. So a lot of investments are brought under. You don't need approval anymore of the government. So this is a great change from what the earlier rule was in '73. So it is very investor friendly, and anybody who's looking at investing into this country or doing trade has a lot of forums through which they can get information and support from the government, as well as redressal of their grievances. Okay, this is important thing is that the Reserve Bank of India comes out with this master direction every year. Generally, they used to do it on the 30th of June for exports of goods and services, and another for imports. So it basically gives guidelines. And so the last was updated somewhere in November last year. And so since you are from the US, you would probably look at imports. You're looking at exporting your goods to India. So I will focus on the import of goods and services. What does it cover? It covers your remittances for import payments. It has to be done in a time-bound manner. It talks about import licenses, so which is where goods are restricted. Then it talks about evidence of import, because they say, okay, you're sending money up overseas, but there must be proof that the goods have actually been imported, because they don't want foreign exchange to be fleeing the country, without any background. And then, of course, is merchanting trade. Merchanting trade is something where goods do not physically enter the country, but you import it and you re-export. So I may purchase from the US and export to, say, Thailand. So the goods will not ever reach India, but it's called a merchanting. So what the documentation and the value addition is done in India. So this is also, the guidelines are very well defined in this master direction. Then This is if you're looking at doing business in India as a foreign company. There are two. One is to do an office setup, and the other is to set up a manufacturing base. So when you do an office setup, you have a choice of doing either a liaison office, a branch office, or a project office. So there is a slight difference in the sense the liaison office cannot do any business activities or earn income. The branch office can do business, earn income, but they cannot do any manufacturing. And the project office can do restricted specific projects. It's a temporary, it's not a permanent base. It's set up for, international project requirements or any for that matter. So these are for office setup, but you also have manufacturing setup in which you can do it through a subsidiary. And subsidiary means you could do a wholly owned subsidiary. You come in and set up from scratch, or you have a joint venture with the local Indian partner, which is the most preferred route because the nuances of doing business in India, understanding the tax laws, the regime, and local considerations, and there are plethora of you have to get approvals, and that even though there's a single window for foreign investors, it can be challenging. So there are many companies who have entered India and have exited. They did not succeed even after being in India for years. I mean, recently Chevrolet, Ford, who have been in India for 15 years, 20 years, they've decided to exit. So this is because it is challenging. It's a very competitive market, and the customers here are demanding in terms of price as well as of quality. Yeah. Then of course you have a limited liability partnership. This is a new term or a new form of organization which has come into existence. It's similar to, I think, your LLC, which you have in the US. So in this, it's where it is found more user friendly, and there are not too many requirements, or so the compliances are far easier. So a lot of entities have moved into India through the LLP route. Now, of course, the key provisions for investment in India. One is you'll have to, for your consideration, one is the entry route, whether it's automatic or approval. So that you have to see your product category, and accordingly you can decide. Then whether your category has any caps, I mean, this is the maximum investment, or, so the sector cap are also stipulated, because they don't want to create, monopolies or unrealistic competition. So the other is, of course, your eligible investee. So how you would like who are the people overseas who can invest in India, the non-residents, but through what route, so, and the investees, as I mentioned earlier, as an LLP or a different form of Indian company. The other is, of course, there is some have a lock-in period where you cannot exit. You may invest and then you decide to exit. So there are periods specified where you have to remain invested. And then how do you do your investment, either through equity or debentures or different kinds of convertible notes. So those are done through the investment organizations. And of course, you have the prohibited segments. So these are things you need to consider, all aspects. So for which you need to take a lot of legal advice before you decide, and how you would like to enter into the country. So I've given some examples of caps and entry routes, like agriculture and animal husbandry, 100% you can through the automatic route. I mean, there is no cap at all. Then plantation, again, 100% automatic. Mining, print media is got a lot of government control, and foreign investment is not encouraged. We have a lot of control press still, in spite of saying, okay, it's the fourth pillar of democracy and we have a lot free press here, but you can determine how free by this. And then we have the farmer which 100% is allowed in greenfield projects. But if it's a brownfield, then there's up to 74%. Beyond that, you need approval. Insurance was open.
What is the difference between greenfield and brownfield? What are those?
Yeah. Greenfield is something by nature is something which you absolutely new, where you purchase the land and you build up the factory and the manufacturing, the whole manufacturing setup with the equipment and everything. You bring in the plans, and so that's why it's called greenfield, in the sense that it would probably have been a green area or a farmland, or open space which was never used. So it's called greenfield. Whereas a brownfield is already an existing unit, so which you buy over because you already got an established manufacturing equipments. So you don't have to. You shorten the process of starting your manufacturing from the time you decide to enter. You invest to the time you start manufacturing. It is greatly shortened, so you get your return on investment faster. But here, of course, you have restrictions, limitations, in the sense that you cannot design. If you have a design of how you have your manufacturing process carried out, and the current setup is designed a different way, to modify all that, rework it, would involve a lot of effort. And other thing is, since equipment is already aged, so your maintenance activity starts earlier. And so the brownfield is basically because it's means everything around is brown. Probably they've already contaminated the environment because they've been in existence. So, that's a way of explaining it. Yeah. So, okay. Yeah, so that's how, because many look at existing units, and especially because it's easier. And that's how Indian companies look at brownfield units when they enter the US, because they know that the US has got established manufacturing setup. So it would be easier to, you just take over and start, Okay. Yeah, but recently the insurance sector has opened up. It used to be just 25%, then it moved to 49% about a few years back, and this year they made it 74% for automatic route. So they feel that there should be more depth in the insurance sector. So I see a lot of companies, especially in the US, could find a great opportunity here, because this is insurance. I think the number of people, or the companies definitely insure themselves, but individuals maybe just 10%, or maybe even far less. So Donna would find it interesting that, insurance has a big scope, and in India, people are still reluctant. They still believe in, in that God would take care of them. Yeah,
keeping care.
Yeah, so that life will anyway be, is foretold. It's written on our forehead or whatever. So we would not, so the reluctance, and they say, why not put that money into the stock market? Now it's booming, you get more returns. So they weren't thinking too long terms. And I have friends, who have never taken a single insurance product in their life. So, and they will never do, so they say we are making much more money, and they would laugh at me because I've taken so much of life insurance and insurance for your motor car insurance or health insurance. But they say they've not even taken health insurance. They say, if we, this thing, we will come to that, and why, I could use, because I don't know when I may fall ill, maybe after 10 years. So, the thinking is still quite traditional. So that's where the good opportunity is there. Yeah, so Donna, if you're there, Yeah, there's a good scope for
It's a
you
business model.
here in
Business
India,
India.
and we welcome you to
Right.
with your
Bring your life.
expertise. Yeah.
Very good.
So yeah.
Okay.
So yeah. So yes, I think the Indians would should have a session with you. They learn a lot. You know.
Well, there are a few
Uh,
companies who are in India selling life insurance. I think New York
yeah,
Life
there are
may.
many.
They're not
But
many.
there are many, and many have collaborated. But as I told you, the penetration is very minimal.
Yeah, culture.
And
It's
you
a
know,
culture challenge.
so more companies can come in, and I say the reluctance is there. So education, I mean, insurance education is very important. So actually, these companies are there, but they do through their employees and agents who just come to sell because they have got these targets, you know, and they just come, they visit and say, you know, take this, you'll get this return. But it's how you educate. And when I hear Donna, she presents, I mean, she is appealing from a concern point, you know, and how it's important for you. It's not an investment with returns. It's an important aspect of your financial portfolio for your future, for your family. So this has to get across, you know, and so how you, yeah. So if you just look at getting a sale, you know, then it really can put off maybe, you know, a buyer. So it's or a consumer, I would say. So it's yeah. So that's it's important education in the insurance sector. Then I would go to sectors prohibited for FDI. Yeah, so it's basically any kind of gambling, lottery, and interesting is, of course, manufacturing of cigars and tobacco and tobacco substitutes, which I found quite. So there are many cigar manufacturing companies, but they're all Indian owned. And of course, yeah, even in terms of branding and franchising, any organization which is, you know, connected with lottery is not allowed. And these chit funds and Nidhi company, I think, are very unique to South Asian. They are not just Indian, but you will see it in our neighboring countries also. They are basically a kind of loan arrangements where, you know, known people, maybe in the neighborhood, would get together, pool in their money, and then it's loaned to somebody at a particular rate. Now, many of these are not covered by the Reserve Bank or by the banking regulations. So these are, but they give you better returns. And, you know, to access money through the banking system, you need some credibility and a good credit rating. You need a lot of documentation. So it doesn't work for many Indians, I would say. And if you go into the smaller towns, villages, this informal sector still is very large. It is recognized by the government, but they don't come under any particular regulation. So they are risky, but it still benefits a vast majority. So who need to access funding. So this, of course, is not open to foreign investors. And first of all, foreign will not, because anything which is cross-border has to meet certain standards, international standards and framework. Yeah. So that's all. I've talked about the great economy and opportunities in India, but I would like to also give some warning, or I would say just make you aware that there are challenges, and it's not that if you have the idea or you have the money or the resources, you can succeed in this market. It's a very large market, but there are a lot of legal loopholes, and, you know, so these challenges, understanding them, having good, I would say, legal companies or good legal counsel is very important. Then the tax regime, we brought in a national GST tax regime, but it is challenging to understand. It's one of the most complicated. I think it's probably the most they have to simplify it. So if you're looking at manufacturing here, it's another challenge. That's why most companies prefer the collaboration or the joint venture route, where you can have the Indian partner who is well experienced in this take care of that, And of course, intellectual property rights, there are many regulations. We are part of the TRIPS and the GATT and all the other international organizations. So we do follow international this protection of trademarks and copyrights and everything. But there could be issues because of implementation. It's a very vast country, and so therefore there are a lot of panels which are there available for arbitration and for counseling and for resolution of disputes. So these are things which so ease of doing business is, we have moved up this ladder, but still we are far than most of the many countries in Asia, Southeast Asia, or even besides Europe and US. So that's there, but as I said, it's a growing economy, the fastest. So the opportunities are tremendous, stupendous, I would say. Okay. And so that's all I have for my presentation. I've been brief. I just wanted to give you an overview.
No, you did well. You did well.